Okay, that's true. And then we also use interactive board for questions and answer for the entire keynote sessions, right? So this link can be accessible from the IEC website?
I believe so. Can we show the link to Padlet on the screen, please? QR code and the link. Okay, if you have used Padlet before, this is simple. You can double tap the screen. We are going to show you the link in a moment. And once you double tap the screen, you can type your question or voice your thought. It is anonymous unless you want to tell us your name. You can be James Bond, you can be Lisa Blackpink, you can be Bam Bam, you can be anyone that you may like.
Okay, I think now people are having their devices ready, and it's really the time we are looking forward to. That is the time for our keynote, the first keynote speech, entitled Encoding the Business of Online Education by Mr.Dhawal Shah. Please, Mr. Dhawal Shah.
Okay, please allow me to give a brief bio of Dhawal Shah. Dhawal Shah is the founder and CEO of Class Central from the state. If you know, that is the world-best MOOC search engine website. He's gonna give presentation in the topic of decoding the business of online education. Dhawal developed a passion for education while pursuing his computer science of master degree level at the Georgia Tech. With the rise of free online courses from top universities, he created a one-page website that curates these offerings. From that small website, which is called Class Central, has since become the world must-visit destination for discovering and finding online courses with nearly 200,000 courses and also a lot of insight information. Well, I can say Class Central has helped more than 60 million learners to choose the proper course that will enhance their life. Dhawal also share one thing with you, Madam MC. You are all cat lovers. So without further delay, please give a big hand to welcome Dhawal Shah.
Thank you, everyone. You can hear me all right, right? So I'm Dhawal. I'm the founder and CEO of Class Central. It's good to be back here in person. This is my third time speaking at this conference. The first time it was back in 2017, and that was my first ever keynote of my life. And I was really nervous and scared, but the team here kept me really comfortable, and also fed me really tasty and spicy Thai food. So I'm very grateful for that. And they also gave me one of my favorite possessions, this cup, which I still use to this day to drink chai. And it's also sort of started a hobby of mine where whenever I go to a new country, I end up trying to find a cup, but none of them are this personalized. And so today I'll be talking about the business of online education, and I'll sort of illustrate some of the details over these business using these 4 companies as an example. So we'll sort of follow the case study approach. Generally, when people talk about online education, it's generally focused from the perspective of a learner, what they need, what they want, the skill gap, or sometimes pedagogy. But I'm trying to project here a different lens from the business. The companies you see here combined make over $1 billion a year, and 3 of them are public. So their needs and wants also dictates what direction online education goes. And that's what I'm trying to illustrate here. And sort of that's the agenda, understanding online education through the lens of revenues. And then sort of comparing and contrasting consumer versus business segments. Consumer is whenever you go and buy a course, it's a consumer, a learner. But business is when companies sell to, when providers sell to companies. Like basically companies buy access to a Coursera or LinkedIn Learning for their employees. And at the moment, business is a bigger driving force than consumer, and that's something I'll highlight. And we'll again look at the impact of pandemic on these businesses. But we'll look at, not narratives like new normal, but we'll focus on very specific example, data-driven examples. And, for the sources, I collected a lot of this information from the public filings. So 3 of the companies, Coursera, Udemy, and Thinkific, are public, and they have to file annual reports, quarterly reports, which I have read through. I've also listened to their earnings call and collected a lot of information about how these companies are run. Khan Academy itself a non-profit, so they have to file taxes, which is public. And finally, a lot of this has already been written about on Class Central's The Report. That's a publication where we, from course reviews to course recommendations, to the business of the news and analysis of online education. So we published articles about these topics, and we have more than 1,000 articles that we have published. So let me just tell you what Class Central is before we get into some other topics. So Class Central was a search engine. I built it back in 2011 as a side project. I saw a few Stanford courses coming up, and I decided to build a one-page site to keep track of all these courses. And later on, these courses started being called as MOOCs, or Massive Open Online Courses. And Class Central became the place to find them. We aggregate all these courses into one place. And recently, we have expanded beyond just university courses to different providers like Udemy, Skillshare, LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, even YouTube. And currently, our catalog is over 175,000 courses. And the pandemic also gave us more resources, more financial resources. And that's what we used it to. We used it to expand our catalog. Before the pandemic, we were focused mostly on university courses. But then since the pandemic, we have started growing our catalog to almost everything. And we sort of expect our catalog to grow over 200,000 courses by the end of this year. And our team is completely remote. Most of the people who work for us are actually previous Class Central users. So they are learners and they're users of the platform and eventually started working for Class Central. We have done combined over hundreds of courses as well as multiple online degrees. So Class Central is kind of like of the learners, for the learners, by the learners. We follow that philosophy. And our combined mission is to make online education work for everyone. And as a first step, we focus on aggregation, where we collect everything in one catalog. And then we have learners leave reviews. We have hundreds of thousands of reviews. And sort of our goal is to help people find the best courses wherever they exist. But then we have also built an ecosystem of tools and services. One of them is a bookmark. So you can bookmark a course as you're browsing through the catalog. One of the most, I think, interesting ones, what we call is a follow button for education. So you follow a provider, you can follow a university, or you can follow any subjects. And whenever new courses are added in our catalog, we send you a notification. So it's a passive way to keep up with the learning sort of ecosystem. And since 2011, we have helped 60 million people find their next course. At the moment, we get 2 million visits a month. Before I get into the actual topic of business of online education, I would like to just quickly recap the pandemic boom and bust, specifically in online education, through some examples. And then we'll see this narrative repeat again and again. So in March 2020, when quarantine measures went across the world, a lot of people found themselves with time on their hands and energy, and many of them started looking towards online courses. In the first few days of quarantine, Class Central got as much visitors in one day as it did in the month before. But that sort of, as quarantine dragged on, that dissipated very quickly, and sort of energy sort of left the room too. And you can see this in one slide. Like if you look at the registration numbers of some of the bigger platforms, you can see like 2019 and 2021 are pretty similar, except for Coursera. I think that's one platform that sort of stood out and was able to keep a lot of momentum that they gained in 2020. And throughout this period since the pandemic, a number of companies went public. Some of them got acquired too. Here's one example. 2U acquired a nonprofit called edX for 800 million. And now 2U's market cap is 250 million, 1/3 of what they paid for edX. Similarly, Skillsoft acquired Codecademy. This was one of the earlier players in online education that became popular in 2011, and it did interactive in-browser coding classes. And now Skillsoft is worth 205 million. So this is sort of what happened. Like companies got caught up in the hype of new normal and kind of rushed to accommodate that growth, but that growth never came, and they all had to pull back. And this happened across different sectors, and online education is no different. And that's what led to layoffs. Like all major platforms, education platforms, especially the ones that rely on VC funding, or they were public companies, they all went through layoffs. And some of them went to much drastic layoffs. And we'll see some of these examples too. All right, so now let me compare the three companies, that I'm going to cover: Coursera, Udemy, and Thinkific. Let's start with the first two, Coursera and Udemy. On Coursera, only selected partners can create a course. So if you are an academic and if you want to offer a course on Coursera, your institution has to sign an agreement with Coursera. But on Udemy, anyone can create a course, and there's just a minor reviews process. And in Coursera and Udemy, the way the marketing works is like they have a website, they have a marketplace. So you go to Coursera or Udemy, you search for Python, you see a list of courses, and if you have enough reviews, they show up higher up, and that's how the marketing works. But then the Coursera's and Udemy's take a fee for that marketing. They take more than 50% of the revenue. In contrast, Thinkific, the simplest way to understand Thinkific is basically if you want to launch your own Coursera or Udemy. But the drawback is you have to do all your marketing. So they give you the tools to launch your own branded, content or platform, and they don't take a cut of the revenue. You pay a fixed monthly cost, and we'll break down each businesses further. But I just wanted to set the stage of like how these platforms are, and I think they represent a category of the kind of platforms you see online. And they all, like Coursera is the biggest one. There's edX, FutureLearn. Then you have regional platforms like Thai MOOC, JMOOC, and Swayam in India. Udemy is very similar to Skillshare, LinkedIn Learning. They focus more on skill-based courses. And Thinkific, has similar competitors, Teachable and Kajabi. So if you understand sort of these businesses, you'll understand a lot what is going on in online education. And that's something I just wanted to set the stage for. All right, so let's get into our first company, Coursera. So Coursera was originally started, and they used to partner exclusively with universities, and universities used to offer their courses online for free. And over time, the way the model has evolved is the courses are still free, but you end up paying for graded assignments and also certificates. And most recently, Coursera has been expanding into getting courses from tech companies like Google, Microsoft, IBM, and Meta. And this is how they share in their financial documents. This is how they share what their sort of catalog looks like. So basically, they have over 6,000 courses. And a bunch of these courses come together to call the micro-credential they call specialization. So if you earn they generally have 4 to 6 courses together. And if you finish all of these courses, earn individual certificates, you get a specialization certificate. There's a new category they put in called, certificates, which are professional certificates from the companies that I mentioned before. And that's one of their fastest growing segment. And finally, they have 50 plus degrees, online degrees, fully online, and in a number of different countries from, Central America, South America, US, London, India. So they seem to be growing in that direction too. And broadly speaking, that's how they present themselves, as three different segments. Consumers is just normal learners, businesses or enterprise or businesses when they target companies buy catalog access for their employees. And then you have degrees where they partner with universities to launch fully online degrees. Did I shut it off? Oops. All right, and here's how consumers pay for it. Usually you can sign up for one specialization, which is $49 to $79 a month, and then you get access to graded assignments and the opportunity to earn a certificate. But as soon as you stop paying, that access is taken away. Or the other option is Coursera Plus, where you basically pay a monthly fee or an annual fee, and you get access to a majority of the catalog. Similarly, businesses also get something similar to a Coursera Plus, where they pay an annual fee and they get access, they buy basically licenses for their employees. And sometimes some of these, depending on the size of the company and the size of the contract, it can be a multi-year, thousands of employees contract. These deals can be worth millions of dollars. And sort of, this is the quarterly revenue graph of Coursera. And you can see like how sort of it has jumped up in the second quarter of 2020. And sort of, if you just draw a straight line from 2000, the 2 quarters before, and assuming the growth was similar, you see Coursera ends up much different place without the pandemic. To me, like the pandemic represented an opportunity for certain companies to kind of skip 2 years of growth. They were 2 years ahead of where they would be without the pandemic. And let's break down these numbers further. And you can see like, the consumer revenue is the one that actually grew, but immediately it sort of went down after that, after the second and third quarter of 2020. And then somehow Coursera was able to keep growing beyond, in 2021 and later, which is not true for Udemy, as you will see later on. And look at, the enterprise or B2B segment, which is the red line. And it's very smooth. It's very predictable. And, like it always goes up, it doesn't go down. And, if you have a good product, companies keep buying it more and more. So if you start with a contract for 100 employees, next year you might do 110 or 150. And in a way, you keep making more revenue from the same people or the same companies. And that's why it's, it's preferred by the investors. It prefers there is some predictability to it, but B2C or consumers can be very fickle, and they're very subjected to market trends. For some reason, Coursera's degrees revenue hasn't really grown for a long time, but the number of students has been growing consistently. And again, in this graph also, you can sort of see the pandemic impact, where there's a big jump, in the fall semester of 2020. That's when all the usually universities accept admissions. The graph says dollar, but it's almost 20,000 students currently learning, taking a degree on Coursera. And generally this line has consistently gone up, but somehow the revenues are not. So it just means that each student is taking less courses, even though the number of students has increased. And this is sort of the distribution of revenue. Almost 57% is from consumer, and 35% is from enterprise or businesses. And this has remained stable over time. Coursera has maintained this ratio almost similar for more than a year. And now you can sort of see just the raw numbers. Let's take a look at the total revenue column first. And you can see in 2017, it was less than 100 million. And now in 2022, it's over $500 million. So they've grown almost 5x in 5 years. But the one that has grown the most is the enterprise. In 2017, it was almost non-existent, $7.4 million, and now it's over $181 million. And that's where the growth lies in. And as you can see, Coursera went public in 2021, and as soon as they go public, to get growth, the losses increase. They also get more money, but they also trade off profitability for faster growth. And this is a common theme you will see. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And sort of this is the distribution of revenue. And for Coursera, a majority of their revenue is from US. So 47% of their revenue comes outside of US. And I think that's probably because of a higher price point. Coursera charges, $49 a month, which is inaccessible to a lot of countries. And then here's the total revenue versus projected revenue for 2023. And the interesting term is gross margin, and you can see it's dropped by a lot. So let me explain what gross margin is. If someone comes and spends $100 on Coursera, Coursera will share a part of that revenue with the creator, with the institutions. And the part that it keeps, it's its margin. So basically for every $100, Coursera keeps $63 in 2022 and shares 37 with the creators. But that's changed drastically in 2023. So what happened? Coursera said that one of their industry partners, largest industry partners, renegotiated deal. For example, let's say, they never said Google officially, but it doesn't take a lot to guess it's Google. For example, if they, in 2022, if you buy a Google cert for $100, then Coursera would keep 70 and give Google $30. But in 2023, they renegotiated, and maybe they both will keep $50. These numbers just to explain. We don't know the actual revenues, but based on what they shared, I did some back of the envelope calculation, and I figured out that almost $100 million of Coursera's 2022 revenues came from Google. And that's why when you go to Coursera now, it shows you more of the content from tech companies, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and IBM. These certificates are, people are more willing to pay for a topic like UI, UX from Google than from a university, and Coursera has sort of shifted in that direction. And sort of you can see the margins like here month by year by year. For the consumer margin, you can see it go up until 2023 and it goes down. So as Google's certificates started making more and more revenue, effectively it meant their consumer margin across the board sort of went up. But what's interesting is enterprise margin is very static, which means that, you know, Coursera keeps more of it. And that's why it's, you know, it's another, you know, lucrative thing for a platform to have more B2B or enterprise revenue, because it's more profitable compared to B2B, which they have to share, you know, a majority of a good chunk of the revenue with the creator in B2C, but B2B you share much smaller percentage. And we'll see this happen with Udemy too. And last year, sort of Coursera conducted layoffs, which I was a bit surprised about, because at that time they had like $700 million in the bank. So they didn't really need to do it. And this year, sort of they announced like a stock buyback program, like almost $100 million. So in a way, all the savings they got, it was, you know, kind of spent in stock buyback. So my theory is they were just focused on their stock price, which is significantly lower than when they went public, but is slowly sort of on the way up. All right, let's move on to Udemy. So Udemy is a platform that anybody can launch a course. You just, you know, you record a video and record a few videos, put a syllabus up, you publish it, and there's a 48-hour review process, and if you get approved, it goes online. But that doesn't mean, you know, you'll get enrollments. So this is an analysis we did of Udemy's catalog. And, you know, what we found was the median enrollment is only 240. So like over 100,000 courses will barely get, you know, hundreds of learners. And, you know, here also you can see sort of the pandemic impact. Not only were learners taking more courses, but more people jumped in creating courses. And that's why you see the 2019 to 2020 growth. And currently Udemy has well over 200,000 courses in their catalog. It's one of the largest, you know, players in online education players. And the course prices are generally range from $19.99 to $199.99. That's the US pricing. But in other countries, they sell it for significantly less prices. And even in US, it's always discounted. So I have never paid more than $20 for a Udemy course. And this is just the distribution by category. As you can see, technology and business are the largest category of courses, which is true for Coursera too. And that's just, these courses are the ones that are most monetizable. And the biggest language is English, followed by Portuguese and Spanish. And this is what they present in their financial filings. Every month they get more than 34 million visitors. And like Coursera, there's two main categories. Coursera has degrees, but Udemy has just consumer and Udemy for business. And as a consumer, you can either, you know, either take a subscription, which is $30 a month or $200 a year, and you get a small portion of catalog, around 8,000 courses, or you can buy these courses individually. But for physicists, they have to pay for subscriptions, and it starts at $360. And the catalog is bigger than the consumer catalog, consumer subscription catalog. And here's how all the different sort of subscriptions compare against each other. As you can see, Coursera is the most expensive, $400 a year, while Udemy is $200 a year. And I generally feel like beyond $100 to $150, it becomes tough for a lot of learners to pay for that. So I think the sweet spot is between $100 and $150. And sort of you can see this is Udemy's B2C or consumer revenue versus business revenue. And you can see the pandemic impact again. You can see how it jumped up, but then it came back down. But unlike Coursera, they weren't able to actually grow their revenue. It stabilized. But Udemy Business, you can see again, it's growing really fast. And again, you can see the smooth line. The consumer is like jagged. Sometimes they make more, sometimes they make less. But the Udemy Business is a very smooth line that always goes up. And in the most recent quarter, Udemy Business accounted for 57% of their revenues. But a year ago, it was 49%. So slowly, Udemy is becoming more and more business-oriented versus consumer-oriented. And you can just see their revenues. So for example, overall in 2019, they were making $276 million. But in 2022, say almost $630 million. So almost like 2.5 times growth. But the consumer revenue hasn't grown for the last 3 years. 2020 was the peak. 2021, slightly 1% higher, and 22 is lower, and 2023 is projected to be the same. But the growth has been all Udemy Business, from 15.9 million to 314 million. And again, you like Coursera, after they went public, you can see the losses really jump up. So it's a common theme where they raise a lot of money and then they spend a lot of money. And Udemy is, unlike Coursera, which has 47% of revenue outside of US, Udemy has 59% of revenue outside of US. And I think I can attribute that to their lower price point. They also do dynamic pricing in other countries. In fact, if I want to buy a course, I ask my colleague in India to gift it for me. It's significantly cheaper. One of the other stats that Udemy shares is called monthly average buyers. It's basically a number saying how many people in a month buy courses on Udemy. And as you can see, the pandemic impact, like in 2020 Q2, it was 1.8 million. And then it went back down pretty quickly, and it's kind of been stable for a long time. And based on the numbers they provide, I calculated average revenue per buyer. And in 2022, it was $19.5, which is less than their cheapest official price, $19.99. But they always have a discount. There's always a perpetual discount, and very few people buy it at full price. And actually, that's what got them into trouble in California. Basically, if you advertise a price and never sell a course at that price, it's fake pricing or fake advertising. And somebody sued them, and they settled for $4 million. And that's why, I think Udemy likes the B2B much better because you can see like it's just growing, pretty well in all directions. And ARR stands for annual recurring revenue, and it's, it was 370 million, and I think by the end of this year it will cross $500 million just in the B2B sort of segment. And this is how much Udemy instructors earn. And if you remember previously, like, their revenues increased by almost 2.5%. But if you look at this, the instructor payouts between 2019 and 2022, they didn't increase by like 2.5%. In fact, they didn't even double. And, that's sort of the power a platform has. They decide how much they pay you. The bigger they grow, the less they pay you. And because a majority of the revenue comes from Udemy Business, the new revenue comes from Udemy Business, where they sort of keep 70% of the revenue. So their growth rate is much faster than the instructor's growth rate. And, like Udemy is one platform that registered layoffs throughout 2023, but, in February, they finally gave in. And, they also have hundreds of millions in the bank. So I think this is all about stock price, which is, they're also not doing well. They went in the pandemic and they never able to reach their peak or like even close to their peak. So now let me compare the businesses, head to head, like Coursera versus Udemy. So last year, Coursera had a revenue of 524 million, and Udemy had like 630 million almost. And Coursera's market cap was 2 billion, and Udemy is 2.6. But now it's sort of changed where Coursera has increased their market cap, while Udemy has almost lost $1 billion in market cap. Even though on paper, Udemy makes more revenue, I think it's just because their consumer segment is not growing, while in case of Coursera, both their consumer and business segment is growing. You can see like in the pandemic, the gap was pretty big between Coursera consumer and Udemy consumer revenues. But last year, Coursera overtook Udemy's revenues. And in B2B, you can again see the smooth lines where Udemy is growing much faster than Coursera is, and the gap is growing between them. And I think it's attributable to much more lower price point than Coursera's. All right, let's look at our third company, Thinkific. And like Thinkific, as I mentioned, it's a place where you can launch your own Coursera or edX or Udemy. And this is one example. This is CFI, and it's some corporate financial institute or something, and they offer 100+ courses, and they use Thinkific to launch this platform. So they don't need to have too much of technology skills. They don't need to know how to collect payments. And Thinkific does all it for them. They just maybe do some skinning and make this website look and feel nice as how they want. And that's possible with Thinkific. Similarly, Fiverr Learn, like Fiverr is a popular gig economy platform, and they also have their own platform where they sell courses, and it kind of looks like the Udemy platform. And this is what Thinkific allows you to create your own platforms, whether it be a small business or a large company offering hundreds of courses. It's very simple to launch a course on Thinkific. And and this is their pricing plan. It's fixed per cost, so you don't have to share with Thinkific. So as your revenue grows, you get to keep all of it. And I think that's a big advantage, but you have to do your own marketing. And this is just Thinkific's, revenues, and if you compare the revenues and net loss, you can see Thinkific, as soon as it went public, the losses increased drastically. Like in 2020, they had only $1.3 million in losses, and then it rose to 26 million and 36 million. But then the revenues didn't grow as much. The revenues kind of, grow much significantly slower. And that's why if you look at the head count, it got reduced in 2022. See, the other number I want to focus on is GMV, gross merchandise value. That's what Thinkific shares with it. So for example, if you spend $100 on a platform like that is, Thinkific based, so that number comes in the GMV, gross merchandise value. But if you spend $100 in Coursera or Udemy, that comes in consumer revenue. So I think these two numbers are head to head. You can compare, and you can see more sales happen on Thinkific than Coursera or Udemy. Even though these two platforms get all the attention. And what's interesting is Coursera and Udemy keep majority of this, so over 50% of this revenue. But the 409 or 10 million, it all goes to Thinkific creators. So even if you combine how much Coursera and Udemy are combined sort of paying their creators, which amounts to around $300 million, in B2C, Thinkific creators are making a lot more. Again, you have to do your own marketing, and if you have that power, you get to keep a bigger portion of the revenue, and sort of you also get some direct contact with your users. You get their email addresses and everything, so you don't have to compete with others. And again, this is just quarterly revenue numbers. You can sort of see the net loss, it keeps growing. And then in 2022, Q1 2021 kind of peaks out, and it, slowly goes down. But the revenue doesn't really increase so much. And basically, the way it was achieved was through layoffs. The company reduced their headcount drastically, and at least 2 rounds of layoffs that we know of. And that's how they have been sort of reducing their losses. So yeah, so not, just spending more money doesn't mean getting more money. And their stock price is, very, very low, like compared to other two. Like I think this is $150 million. So I think, and at some point they were like 10x of that. So they're struggling on multiple fronts. They took a nice profitable business and sort of tried to go and to the growth route, and then it didn't really turn out well. All right, the last one, Khan Academy. And unlike the first 3, which were targeted towards adult learners, Khan Academy is more towards kids, K-12, and and then it does a number of other projects too. But that's their core audience is generally kids. And here are some top level figures. Since 2008, they have raised donations more than $365 million and almost $80 million in program services revenue. Not many people know this, but there's actually a physical Khan Academy school. It's actually 10-15 minutes from where I live, and that's a separate non-profit. And Khan Lab School, it's called. And then Khan Academy donated like $3.4 million to Khan Lab School. It costs around $30,000 a year to send your kids to Khan Lab School. So it's a very premium school. And yeah, and you have 115 million in net assets at the end of Khan Academy has, 2021. And the donations, like, look at their revenues, they grew drastically in 2020. You can see, the donations really like getting really high and then coming back down in 2021. And sort of here's the comparison high level. You can see like, the revenues sort of increase, or the donations, contribution and grants increase in 2021. But, like Khan Academy sort of feels more measured than the rest of the companies we saw. They didn't really increase their headcount drastically. They stuck to their like non-profit roots. Maybe their losses increased, but, they have 100 million in the banks. They can afford to lose some money. And overall, they have like 140,000 million registrations at the end of 2021. And if you further break down the revenues, you can see different categories. So in 2020, foundations and individual gifts was the biggest category. And I think as sort of people thought everything was going to go remote, a lot of people, rich people especially, started donating to Khan Academy. But sort of that went back in 2021. Corporate gifts also went up in 2021, surprisingly not in 2020. And community giving is just, when normal people give money to Khan Academy. And that kind of stayed pretty stable. They also have something called earned income, which I'll talk later. And this is the donation sort of, every year they publish an impact report, and then they list a bunch of names in these categories, and I just went ahead and counted all of them. And they have like 20 people who donated 1 million and above, and usually it's like the Gates Foundations and like that kind of, And this is their revenues. I never could figure out, who's paying them. The speaking fees is the one that only makes sense because Sal Khan is like famous and people probably pay him to speak at their events. But in their tax returns, they never sort of say what the development fees or maintenance fees, content like licensing fees are. So they're very quiet about that. And most recently, Khan Academy launched a bot called Khan Migo. They were one of the launch partners for ChatGPT, or when GPT-4 was launched. And it's still in beta testing, and I guess we'll find out more soon about it, but it's still, this is where they are focusing on. And if you go, on their website, they try to push you towards it. You have to pay a $20 a month donation to get access to it. But yeah, Sal Khan, if you keep follow the news, sort of he's on tour promoting this. Yeah, that's it. I know it sort of ends abruptly, but there's like 90 slides. I had a lot to share. So I guess we have time for questions.
Okay.
Hello.
Right. So thank you very much, Dhawal. It's very insightful sharing that you share with all of us here. I believe, yeah, thank you. Ajahn Chang, do we have Q&A sessions now?
Yes, first I would like to ask the audiences in this room, anyone would like to ask a question, please? All right, Professor Cherry, please.
Okay, a very good morning, and thank you very much for the very informative, and let's our audience have a very good morning with a lot of good profile figures, comparisons of these, the online educational resources, which is very interesting. As we are in the field of education and online learning has been influencing us a lot, yes, I would like to ask that from your review, what will be the futures of the normal higher education institute that can adopt this kind of platform and integrate it into their traditional educations that they offer now? Yes, what will be the trend?
Usually I tell what the past is. I'm not good with the future. And generally the people I focus on are adult learners, people are outside of the sort of education system, and all these platforms generally are more popular, once people graduate. Like, I don't know if you remember, like early 2011, 12, 13, when MOOCs were coming up, there's a lot of hype about like higher education getting disrupted, but it never sort of happened, And I think people who have access to good education, they don't seek these platforms, but people who don't, they do seek, and that's why they seem to be more popular in like countries which don't have a lot of top universities. So I do feel like sometimes the purposes are different. Like higher education maybe gives you a different set of skills, which might be like, for example, you might learn design at a higher education, but if you want to learn Figma, you might go to one of these platforms. So I think there is these platforms tend to be more pragmatic, more short term, and while higher education can be more long term. So I think, there's this balance of, in person, you can learn different set of things, while online you can learn how to apply what you learn in person. So I feel like they are not contrast to each other. I feel they're like,
Okay, thank you very much. Another thing that what I have learned from your presentations, you have shown a lot of number, figures, comparing, yes. But all this is the look from the top down, who organize and who administrate the organizations. One thing that I think that it is also important, I would like to know from your view that what is the main factor that make people make a decision to choose the different platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think usually if you pick a topic, like, you want to learn something, I think the brand of, matters a lot. So that's why like companies like Coursera, they always sign up big brands, whether be it Google or whether be it, top universities. So I think that matters a lot. If you get a good brand and they offer a certificate, that works. Because people like familiarity. So if you already know Google, if you don't know, like, it's a very confusing place. I struggle to find the right course, and I live and breathe the space. So, and then there's all like social media recommendations, there's reviews is another big factor. I think people ask their friends, and I think there's this whole world that happens behind the scenes that also matters. But I would say, if you don't know anything, I think people prefer brands. They prefer some familiarity, and that's how they go forward. And when that fails, then maybe look at other platforms.
Oh, this is a very good answer that I think that all of us can apply it. Yes, from what you have contribute. Yes, and this is the really useful. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the question. We also have, okay, there is another question over there, please. And we also have questions on the Padlet waiting for you as well. Maybe about 100 questions.
Oh.
No, don't want to scare you, a few questions.
So hello, thank you. My name is Prim, and thank you very much for your presentation. And we had heard a lot of different online courses, and as well as like a financial analysis. And I'm also one of their students, and I also use Class Central, and it's really useful. But I would like to ask about, do you have like analysis of the effectiveness in different courses as a person really takes? Like, in terms of when we have more courses being taken, are people getting the skill? Are people getting the job? Or is it working well? And which kind of education system actually promotes people to get a good education, getting a job? And another question I would like to ask about the sustainability of these platforms and about inclusion of the people. Are we talking about the inclusivity of the people and the sustainability, education and capacity building for emerging technologies and trend?
You know, the first question, I think the courses can only help you so much, and I feel like I've seen for the same course someone do really well and someone not go anywhere. So I think individuals matter more. Your ability to learn matters more. Courses are just one of the tools in your sort of toolkit. So when I'm very skeptical when providers promote this as a skill gap, do this course, and then they present these stats about all, this is how much average job, I'm very skeptical about that. I think it's, if someone does a course and gets a job, it's credit to the learner and not to the course. And, it's very hard to get any real data from them, because all the learning happens on that platform, and they usually don't share. They may share like surveys, which, very small number of people who reply to them. So I feel like it's a very biased set of data. And I forgot the second question.
So it's more it's more depending on an individual person of how they actually advance through these courses as a skill required or not.
Yeah, because all these platforms in pursuit of scale have become passive experiences. But back when like MOOCs, sort of became popular 2011, 2012, when I was doing them, it would be much difficult to do the course. The assignments were much harder, and we would have like tens of thousands of people learning online. So, and there will be harder deadlines. So we will be on weekends, like you would see a spike because there's a deadline. It would have homeworks, but like for going for scale, they have sort of eliminated all these barriers and made it really simple. Like you must have seen YouTube videos of how to get a Coursera certificate with the answers, and before you could only get once or twice, and if you didn't, you failed the course or you don't get a certificate. So I think in pursuit of scale, they have made the courses easier and accessible to more. And additionally, they focus more on intro level. Like they teach you a lot of intro skills, but beyond that, like I struggle yes, it's easy to learn Python, but if you want to apply it in real world, then the learner is sort of left to themselves, because it's in the end, it's still a very linear experience. There's no like exams, there's no real projects in many cases. So, so if you are not willing to do a project on your own outside of the course, it will be very difficult for you to internalize that knowledge. And about like sustainability, inclusivity, I mean, they do it because it makes them feel good to say it, but I just, in the end, that's why I presented a business case, because I think they are businesses and I like to treat them as businesses. And if DEI and other things, don't make money, I don't think they will put real efforts towards it. And even if they do, it's hard to analyze from an outsider perspective, because it just seems to be more of a feel-good kind of thing than actually do good kind of thing. So I'm a skeptical person. So that's why I look at their financial statements. And that's why sort of this presentation stayed away from any narratives around, what they are sharing, and just on numbers, and sort of hopefully you get a sense of, from their numbers, and you can sort of see the truth or make your own opinions.
So we can know how much people are being rich, how much people are being educated, but really cannot measure how effective it was for a course or a specific types of audience. and in terms of like their inclusion, sustainability, and geo were kind of no data about that.
Yeah. I mean, they will be selectively, and occasionally it also depends on course to course. Some professors and some people really care about it, but at the platform level, it's less. And some people go above and beyond, and you see some courses, professors are still responding in the forums, helping you out. But platforms, at this time has sort of a very hands-off approach and let the instructors take the burden of that.
So what kind of platform do you think it will emerge in the future of all different types that you have been saying, that there are Coursera type, Udemy type, and Thinkerflick type? Which one would you think it would be more emerging?
Could you repeat the types?
Like in the different types, like 3 different types that you have been saying, which one do you think it would be emerging in the future? Like more people are using it, more people are benefiting, or in terms of better financial income?
I think they will all stay because education it's not like a movie, you can't keep creating blockbusters. It's just such a personal experience. So not everybody will have the same experience, and people will keep seeking other experiences. And that's why all these platforms, all these sort of types will separately thrive, because a course might work for you, but it might not work for,
So it will continue like what you said. I'm sorry, we are running out of time right now. We also have questions on the Padlet board, which we will invite Dhawal to answer online after this, if you don't mind. For example, these tough questions from my Madam MC, and also other questions what someone call you as Mr. MOOC Ambassador. So that is your new name, Mr. MOOC Ambassador. Don't you agree so? All right. Okay, so we also have some people uploading photos, lovely photos. So thank you so much. If you want to have your photo on our board, please do so as well, like these 2 people smiling. So we have heard a lot from Dhawal, but please stay tuned. We have jam-packed sessions after this, all of the top qualities. But for now, please give a big applause to Dhawal one more time, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think they all have been very good audience. So what should we reward them?
Yes,